My koi pond wasn't just a water feature. It was a meticulously crafted ecosystem of peace, a living tapestry woven into the back corner of my property in Willow Glen Preserve. It felt less like landscaping and more like sculpture, coaxed from the earth over years of weekend digging, careful stone placement, and patient cultivation. Smooth, gray river stones, hauled one back breaking load at a time from a distant quarry, formed its gently sloping edges, providing natural filtration and hiding places. Water lilies, their pads ranging from verdant green to deep burgundy, floated in serene constellations on the surface, their delicate white and pink blossoms opening shyly to the sun. And beneath that reflective skin, life moved with a mesmerizing, liquid grace. Koi, they were living jewels, the stark, calligraphic black and red patterns of a prized Showa, the elegant, flowing tricolor markings of a Sankey, the almost ethereal, pure metallic shimmer of a magnificent platinum ogon, its scales catching the light like polished silver. They navigated the clear, cool water, kept pristine by a cleverly disguised biofiltration system and a small, energy-efficient pump, with the silent dignity of emperors surveying their realm. The gentle, rhythmic murmur of the waterfall spilling over a carefully arranged cascade of flat rocks was the pond's heartbeat, a soothing mantra that usually drowned out the distant hum of lawnmowers and leaf blowers. The everyday soundtrack of suburban existence. This was my sanctuary, my escape hatch from the mundane, a place where anxieties dissolved, leaving only the interplay of water, light, shadow, and the silent, gliding poetry of the fish. This hard-won peace, however, existed under constant threat, frequently shattered by the jarring, invasive whine, quickly escalating into an obnoxious, engine-straining roar, thought of Marjorie Evans's all-terrain vehicle. Marjorie, even her name seemed to carry sharp edges. Residing 3 houses down, but comporting herself as the absolute monarch of Willow Glen Preserve. She held the official title of HOA president. Unofficially, she was the neighborhood scourge, a whirlwind of misplaced authority and simmering discontent. Her sharp, angular features seemed perpetually locked in a state of pinched disapproval, her lips habitually pursed, except, that is, when she was astride her oversized, aggressively knobby-tired, perpetually mud-splattered ATV. In those moments, a smug, almost predatory grin would stretch across her face as she thundered past, leaving behind a miasma of exhaust fumes, engine noise, and palpable civic unease. The inherent incompatibility of powerful recreational vehicles and tranquil suburban subdivisions is a well-documented phenomenon. Our Willow Glen covenants contained predictably vague, almost deliberately ambiguous language regarding nuisance vehicles, excessive noise, and restricting vehicle operation to designated paved roadways. But Marjorie, wielding the twin scepters of the HOA presidency and her own indomitable will, interpreted these rules with a self-serving elasticity that bordered on the comical, particularly when it concerned her own beloved 4-wheeled symbol of dominance. She roared it down quiet residential streets, often exceeding the posted speed limit. She carved muddy ruts across common area greenbelts, justifying these excursions as necessary drainage easement inspections or perimeter security patrols. She occasionally veered terrifyingly close to startled pedestrians, mothers pushing strollers, elderly couples walking small dogs, children learning to ride bicycles, offering neither apology nor acknowledgement, only that triumphant, challenging smirk. Complaints, lodged formally with the HOA, they landed directly on Marjorie's desk, where they were summarily ignored. dismissed as frivolous or personal vendettas, vanishing into the bureaucratic black hole of her autocratic administration. My koi pond, for reasons I could only speculate upon, seemed to function as a particular locus for Marjorie's ire, perhaps its very existence. Its carefully cultivated tranquility served as a silent rebuke to her own chaotic, disruptive energy. Maybe she resented the time and resources I poured into it, perceiving it as an ostentatious display that deviated from the subdivision's preferred aesthetic of low-maintenance conformity. Or perhaps, at its core, she simply possessed an innate, almost primal dislike for anything beautiful, serene, or valuable that wasn't under her direct ownership, or, failing that, her regulatory control. She couldn't find my fish for swimming too slowly, or cite my water lilies for being an unapproved shade of green, therefore. She resented their very presence. Her campaign against the pond had been characterized by a persistent, low-grade bureaucratic harassment. Formal complaints filed with the Architectural Review Committee which, naturally, she chaired, citing the pond as a potential attractive nuisance and unmitigated drowning hazard despite being located entirely within my securely fenced and locked backyard, far exceeding all local safety ordinances. Vague, unsubstantiated allegations presented at HOA meetings regarding unpleasant gurgling noises or fetid odors emanating from the filtration system, a closed loop biological system producing only the gentle sound of the waterfall, completely inaudible from the street or adjacent properties. Objections lodged against the non-native aesthetic of the meticulously chosen Japanese maples and dwarf conifers flanking the pond, claiming they disrupted the visual harmony of Willow Glen's rigidly enforced monoculture of Bradford pears and rigidly pruned crepe myrtles. Each salvo required a formal written response from me, often demanding documented proof of compliance with obscure local codes, which the pond always met or exceeded, and necessitated my attendance at mind-numbing committee meetings. There, Marjorie would grandstand, presenting her concerns with grave solemnity. Before the board, largely composed of individuals seemingly more interested in avoiding her wrath than upholding fairness, would ultimately, reluctantly, dismiss the complaints based on overwhelming lack of evidence. The process achieved nothing beyond wasting my valuable time, fraying my already stressed nerves, and steadily intensifying the undeclared Cold War between us. This simmering tension became the ambient background noise of my life in Willow Glen, punctuated at unpredictable intervals by the approaching roar of Marjorie's ATV. I developed an almost visceral reaction to its distinctive, high-pitched whine, an involuntary tightening in my chest, a tensing of muscles, a subconscious bracing for the inevitable sonic intrusion. It was the auditory signature of Marjorie, often accompanied by the visual of her taking corners with reckless speed, leaning into the turns with a misplaced sense of daredevil bravado, her signature blonde ponytail streaming behind her like a ragged battle standard. A low-grade anxiety became my constant companion, the persistent fear that one day her luck, her dubious riding skills, or simply the laws of physics would betray her near my property. I envisioned her clipping my meticulously aligned mailbox, skidding across the lawn I spent hours weeding and edging, perhaps even smashing into the fence itself. I never, not even in my most anxious, worst-case scenario imaginings, pictured her launching the machine into the pond. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, drenched in the deceptive golden light of late spring. The air was warm, alive with the sweet perfume of blooming gardenias and the drone of distant lawnmowers. I was kneeling at the pond's edge, absorbed in the peaceful, meditative ritual of my weekly maintenance check, testing the water parameters, pH, ammonia, nitrites, ensuring the delicate balance of the ecosystem was holding, admiring the vibrant, almost impossible colors of the koi as they swirled languidly beneath the surface, their whiskered mouths opening and closing in silent greeting, recognizing me, anticipating their afternoon treat of premium pellets. It was a moment suspended in time, a perfect tableau of suburban tranquility. Then, the sound, that familiar, grating whine, but instantly, alarmingly wrong, amplified, closer, angrier. It escalated with terrifying speed, morphing from an irritating buzz into a full-throated, aggressive roar that seemed to vibrate in my teeth, completely overwhelming the gentle murmur of the waterfall. My head snapped up instinctively, my hand hovering, frozen, above the water test vial. Marjorie, barreling down the quiet residential street at a velocity that was not just excessive for the 25 mph zone, it was patently absurd, utterly reckless. She wasn't merely riding, she was performing, putting on a show for an imaginary audience, or perhaps just for herself, executing sharp, unnecessary swerves from the center line to the curb and back again, leaning into the turns with an exaggerated swagger that broadcasted arrogance rather than skill, showing off her machine's power, her own perceived mastery over it. As she rocketed past the house directly opposite mine, her head swiveled sharply towards my backyard, her gaze locked onto me. Kneeling beside the pond, her expression, visible even across the distance, instantly tightened, hardening into that familiar mask of sharp displeasure. What happened next unfolded in a terrifying, disjointed sequence, like frames clipped from a nightmare. Did she decide, in that split second of recognition and peak, to execute a particularly dramatic, contemptuous turn into her own driveway 3 houses down, misjudging the angle and speed? Did her focus waver, distracted by the sight of me, her designated neighborhood antagonist, peacefully tending the very feature she so despised? Or was it simply the inevitable culmination of countless previous acts of recklessness, physics finally calling in its due? Whatever the precise catalyst, the outcome was catastrophic. The oversized, heavy ATV suddenly, violently, fishtailed, its rear tires losing traction on the warm asphalt, time warped, stretching and compressing simultaneously. The roar of the engine seemed to recede, replaced by a roaring silence in my own ears. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, painful drumbeat. I saw the whites of Marjorie's eyes widen in sudden, abject panic as the powerful machine bucked and swerved beneath her like a maddened beast. Her hands, white-knuckled, yanked desperately, reflexively, at the handlebars, a fatal overcorrection. Instead of recovering the turn or even skidding straight, the ATV, now completely out of control, shot forward like a missile escaping its launcher, aimed with horrifying precision directly towards my property. My body reacted before my mind could fully process the trajectory. I scrambled backward, stumbling over the smooth river stones, the water test kit flying from my grasp and shattering against the rocks. The ATV hit the curb with a sickening crack thud, bouncing high, its front wheels lifting clear off the ground for a terrifying instant. It landed hard on the corner of my front lawn, tires biting deep, tearing angry, muddy wounds into the tender fescue I'd so carefully cultivated. It didn't slow. It plowed forward with unstoppable momentum, a mechanical battering ram aimed at my sanctuary. It smashed through the dense row of mature boxwood hedges bordering the side yard with an explosive crunch of splintering wood and shredded leaves, leaving a gaping hole in the green barrier. And then, it reached the carefully arranged decorative boulders surrounding the pond. It hit the largest one, a half-ton piece of granite, launching upwards again in a final, surreal arc, before sailing through the air, impossibly, horribly, and plunging, nose first, into the deepest section of my koi pond. The impact resonated through the ground, a deafening, gut-wrenching crunch, whump sploo, oosh, that seemed to suck the air from my lungs, a geyser of water, mud, uprooted lily pads, and terrified, thrashing fish erupted towards the sky, reaching an unbelievable height before raining down in a filthy, chaotic deluge. Simultaneously, Marjorie, catapulted from the ATV seat as if by an ejection charge, described a clumsy, windmilling arc through the air before landing with a spectacular, utterly undignified WHOMP in the shallower section near the waterfall, disappearing beneath the churning water for a heart-stopping second. For a beat, maybe two, an absolute stunned silence descended, broken only by the incongruously peaceful murmur of the waterfall, the frantic, desperate splashing of traumatized fish near the surface, and the slow, ominous glug, glug, glug of the heavy ATV settling deeper into the pond's embrace, releasing oily bubbles that shimmered iridescently on the fouled surface. Then Marjorie exploded upwards, sputtering, gasping for air, water streaming from her plastered blonde hair, thick strands of pondweed clinging to her face and shoulders like grotesque, slimy tendrils. She looked around wildly, her eyes wide with shock that quickly morphed into pure, unadulterated fury. The front half of her expensive, prized ATV was completely submerged, engine undoubtedly ruined, its single operational headlight casting a weak, accusing beam upwards from beneath the murky water like the eye of some drowned metal beast. My first coherent thought, cutting through the adrenaline and shock, was an almost automatic, ingrained response of basic human concern. "Marjorie!" the first yelled, stumbling towards the pond's edge, my own heart still pounding erratically. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" "Okay," she shrieked, her voice raw, high-pitched, echoing across the suddenly quiet neighborhood. Neighbors were appearing now, drawn by the catastrophic noise, emerging onto their porches, gathering at the edge of my lawn, their faces masks of disbelief and morbid fascination. Marjorie flailed clumsily towards the pond edge, slipping on the submerged rocks. "Am I okay? Look what you did. Look at my ATV. You're stupid. Dangerous pond. It just leaped out. It attacked me." I stopped dead in my tracks, staring at her dripping, furious form. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of her immediate, instinctive deflection left me momentarily speechless. My pond attacked her. The absurdity was staggering. My pond didn't leap anywhere. "Marjorie?" I finally managed, my voice tight, trembling not with fear, but with a rising tide of disbelief and righteous anger. "You lost control of your vehicle. You were driving like a lunatic. We all saw you swerving down the street." "I was driving perfectly fine, perfectly responsibly," she retorted shrilly, scrambling inelegantly onto the large, flat rock beside the waterfall. Dripping pond water and radiating indignation, she jabbed a trembling, accusing finger towards the pond, then towards me. This hazard, it shouldn't even be allowed in a residential neighborhood. It's a death trap, a menace. You put this dangerous thing here. You created this situation. This is entirely, 100%, your fault." A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the assembled neighbors. Mrs. Gable, clutching her trembling chihuahua, whispered loudly to her husband, "Good heavens! George! She almost killed those beautiful fish! Did you see how fast she was going, Mr. Henderson?" My stoic next-door neighbor, who had endured Marjorie's ATV antics with simmering resentment for years, shook his head slowly, his lips pressed into a grim, thin line. "Saw the whole thing," he stated clearly, his voice carrying to the officers who were just arriving. "Came off the street way too fast, tires squealing before she even hit the curb. Lost it completely. Nothing to do with the pond." My focus snapped violently away from Marjorie's ludicrous, self-serving narrative, locking onto the scene of devastation within the water. My sanctuary, violated, desecrated. The water, moments before a crystalline haven, was now a churning, opaque soup of mud, shredded plant matter, and oily residue likely leaking from the submerged ATV. The heavy-duty rubber liner, the pond's essential skin, the result of days of careful fitting and sealing, looked horribly torn near the point of impact. A dark, ragged gash, revealing the lighter underlayment beneath. Several massive landscaping boulders, painstakingly positioned with levers and sheer brute force years ago, were dislodged, tilted at crazy angles, disrupting the careful balance of the waterfall cascade. The row of mature boxwoods, a living green fence, was mangled beyond hope of recovery, but the sight that truly twisted my gut was the plight of the koi. My beautiful, trusting fish. They darted frantically through the clouded water, their usual effortless grace replaced by panicked, jerky movements, their vibrant colors obscured by fear and filth. As the magnificent platinum ogon, my pride and joy, flashed past in a desperate streak of silver near the surface, I saw it clearly, unmistakably, a long, deep, ugly gash running along its flank, trailing a faint, sickening ribbon of blood in the murky water. My breath caught. That fish wasn't just valuable in monetary terms, it was a companion, a presence I'd watched grow from a small fingerling. Its health and beauty a testament to years of dedicated care. Seeing it injured, terrified, because of her recklessness, it felt like a personal wound. "You need to make arrangements to get that machine out of my pond, Marjorie," the first said, my voice dangerously quiet now, the shock replaced by a cold, focused rage that burned away all other emotion. "Right now. And then you need to accept full responsibility for the destruction you've caused." "Responsibility," she scoffed, yanking furiously at clumps of slimy pondweed tangled in her expensive, now ruined, riding jacket. "I'm taking legal action." "That's what I'm taking. You'll be hearing from my lawyer and my insurance company. They'll know how to deal with negligent homeowners like you." "You haven't heard the last of this, Henderson. Not by a long shot." And with that final, venomous threat, she turned and stormed off towards her house, leaving behind a dripping trail of pond water, a landscape of destruction, and a stunned, murmuring crowd of neighbors. The arrival of Officer Davies and his partner brought a necessary, if somber, dose of official procedure to the chaotic scene. They meticulously surveyed the damage path, the deep ruts gouged into my lawn, the splintered chaos of the hedge, the ATV partially submerged in the pond, its rear wheels still resting awkwardly on the dislodged rocks. Officer Davies took my statement first, his pen moving quickly as I recounted Marjorie's reckless approach, the loss of control, and the crash. He then walked over to interview Marjorie, who had briefly re-emerged onto her porch, wrapped in a fluffy towel but still radiating fury. He listened patiently, his expression carefully neutral, as she delivered her increasingly elaborate narrative about the pond being a hidden, unmarked hazard that had suddenly materialized in her path. I saw his eyebrows lift almost imperceptibly at that phrasing. He then spent considerable time collecting detailed statements from Mr. Henderson and at least 4 other neighbors, all of whom independently corroborated witnessing Marjorie's excessive speed, erratic driving, and loss of control before she ever left the paved roadway. The physical evidence, the long skid marks starting on the asphalt street, the clear trajectory across my lawn and through the hedge, told an unambiguous story. The initial police report, Officer Davies stated firmly before leaving, would clearly and unequivocally indicate operator error and reckless driving on the part of Marjorie Evans as the primary cause of the incident. Getting the heavy ATV winched out of the pond was another ordeal entirely. It required a specialized heavy-duty tow truck equipped with a long crane arm. The process inevitably caused further damage to my already traumatized lawn, churning the rutted areas into a muddy swamp. Watching the dripping, mangled carcass of the machine being hoisted ignominiously from the murky depths of my pond felt like excavating a tumor, necessary, but deeply unpleasant. Assessing the full extent of the damage to the pond itself was a gut-wrenching process over the following days. The heavy-gauge EPDM liner, the pond's essential waterproof membrane, was indeed significantly torn near the initial impact point, rendering it useless. This necessitated a complete, costly draining of the thousands of gallons of water, the stressful removal and temporary rehoming of all surviving fish and aquatic plants, and the complex, labor-intensive task of replacing the entire liner. Several of my most prized koi, including the magnificent platinum ogon and a beautifully patterned sankey, were confirmed by the specialized aquatic veterinarian to have sustained significant injuries, deep lacerations, scale damage, and severe stress-induced infections. Their treatment would be expensive, their recovery uncertain, and their long quarantine period a constant source of anxiety for me. The pond's intricate biological filtration system, the hidden heart and lungs of the ecosystem, had sustained direct impact damage. Its delicate network of pipes, biomedia chambers, and the expensive UV clarifier were compromised, requiring significant repairs or replacement. The carefully arranged waterfall rocks were scattered. The Japanese maples flanking the pond were deeply scraped and scarred, potentially inviting disease, and the entire boxwood hedge needed to be ripped out and replaced. The total cost of restoring my sanctuary, my years of labor and love, was rapidly escalating into staggering territory, easily tens of thousands of dollars, far eclipsing the scrap value of Marjorie's waterlogged ATV. This place, I thought, standing amidst the wreckage, the empty pond basin looking like a wound in the earth, is more than just rocks and water and fish. It's where I find my balance. She didn't just crash an ATV, she crashed into my peace. Armed with the official police report, sworn affidavits from multiple witnesses, crystal clear doorbell camera footage capturing Marjorie's reckless approach, and meticulously detailed, itemized estimates from reputable pond specialists, aquatic veterinarians, and landscapers, I formally filed a comprehensive claim with Marjorie Evans's homeowner's insurance company. I laid out the facts clearly, concisely, and irrefutably, citing her documented negligence as the sole proximate cause of all damages. Weeks turned into a month. Silence. No calls from an adjuster. No requests for further information. Nothing. My anxiety began to mix with a growing sense of dread. Then, the certified letter arrived. Thick, heavy paper, bearing the imposing letterhead of a downtown law firm known for aggressive litigation. My stomach plummeted. It wasn't a settlement offer or a query from her insurance company. It was formal notice. Marjorie Evans was suing me. I unfolded the stiff legal document with trembling hands, my breath catching in my chest. I scanned the dense paragraphs of legalese, the accusations leaping off the page like venomous insects. She was suing me for negligence, alleging that my professionally installed, fully permitted, securely fenced koi pond constituted an unreasonable and undocumented hazard to public safety, claiming I had breached some imaginary duty of care by failing to adequately warn vehicular traffic traveling on the public street, yards away from my private property, of the pond's existence, perhaps suggesting I should have installed flashing warning lights and hazard signs around my backyard fish pond. The lawsuit sought damages for her totaled ATV, conveniently omitting any mention of specific ATV insurance, reimbursement for suspiciously high medical bills related to alleged whiplash and severe, debilitating emotional distress, and, the crowning jewel of her audacity, substantial punitive damages intended to punish my callous, willful, and reckless disregard for public safety in the heinous act of building and maintaining a decorative pond in my own fenced backyard. Her own homeowner's insurance carrier wasn't named as a plaintiff. This wasn't a standard subrogation claim where her insurer sought reimbursement after paying her. This was a direct, personal assault, a naked attempt to leverage the legal system to force my homeowner's insurance, and potentially me personally, to pay for the consequences of her own spectacular incompetence and recklessness. The sheer, unmitigated, breathtaking gall of it left me momentarily speechless, then filled me with a wave of cold, clarifying rage. The simmering conflict had just exploded into open warfare. Oh. Oh no. I thought, the anger solidifying into steely resolve. You did not just do this, Marjorie. You picked the wrong fight. This wasn't just about repairing a pond anymore. This was about defending my property, my reputation, and the simple principle that actions have consequences. This was about refusing to be bullied into subsidizing someone else's dangerous stupidity. I immediately contacted Sarah Davison, the sharpest, most tenacious civil litigation attorney in the county, a woman renowned for her meticulous preparation, her fierce advocacy, and her utter disdain for frivolous lawsuits and the bullies who filed them. In the quiet sanctuary of her book-lined office, I laid out the entire sordid chronicle. I presented the official police report clearly citing Marjorie's fault. I provided the list of credible neighbors willing to testify under oath about her history of reckless driving. I showed her the crystal-clear doorbell camera, footage capturing Marjorie's excessive speed, and erratic swerving moments before impact. I handed over the thick file of detailed, itemized estimates for the pond restoration, the specialized veterinary care for the injured koi, including graphic photos of the Ogon's sutured flank, and the complete landscaping replacement. I recounted Marjorie's immediate deflection of blame at the scene and her subsequent lawsuit. Miss Davison listened intently, her sharp eyes missing nothing, her expression shifting from professional focus to barely concealed indignation. When I finally finished, laying the last veterinary bill on her desk, she leaned back, tapping her pen rhythmically against a yellow legal pad. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge like tempered steel. "Marjorie Evans has not only demonstrated a level of negligence that is, frankly, staggering, but this lawsuit," she paused, shaking her head slightly, "this isn't just frivolous, it borders on malicious prosecution. It's an abuse of the legal process, and depending on what representations she made, or failed to make, to her own insurance carriers, we may well be looking at actionable insurance fraud as well." She met my gaze directly. "Our strategy here will not be merely defensive, Mr. Henderson. We will mount a vigorous, comprehensive counteroffensive." Her confidence was a potent antidote to my own swirling anxiety. For the first time since the crash, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. "Miss," Davison drafted a response that didn't just deny Marjorie's claims, but systematically obliterated them, citing the irrefutable evidence point by point. More crucially, she filed a robust, multi-count counterclaim against Marjorie Evans personally, seeking the full, documented cost of restoring my property to its pre-crash condition, including specialized pond reconstruction, veterinary expenses for the injured koi factoring in their significant replacement value, if permanently harmed. Complete landscaping replacement. Compensation for the diminution of my property value, and substantial punitive damages specifically designed to punish her gross negligence, her reckless endangerment of people and property, and her demonstrably bad faith legal maneuvering. The legal machinery ground into motion. Marjorie, represented by an attorney whose bluster seemed to far exceed his legal acumen, refused any initial attempts at reasonable negotiation. His office inundated Miss Davison with burdensome, largely irrelevant discovery requests, seemingly designed purely to harass and increase costs. Demands for the pond's original construction permits from 15 years prior, decades of my personal tax returns, soil composition reports for my entire property, and depositions from my landscaper regarding his choice of mulch. Miss Davison responded with surgical precision, efficiently objecting to the irrelevant and overly broad requests, while simultaneously issuing her own sharply focused, strategically targeted demands. Marjorie's complete maintenance and repair history for the specific ATV involved, proof of any formal ATV operator training or certification, her complete driving record, including any and all prior traffic citations or warnings. Miss Davison had a strong hunch, based on neighbor accounts, that Marjorie's record wasn't pristine. Sworn depositions from every neighbor who had witnessed her habitual reckless driving over the years, and meticulously detailed, verifiable documentation supporting her claims of injury and medical treatment, including diagnoses, physician notes, and billing records which Miss Davison suspected would be difficult for Marjorie to produce in a way that convincingly linked them to the crash she herself caused. The deposition phase proved to be the turning point, the stage upon which Marjorie's house of cards collapsed under the weight of its own falsehoods. Under Miss Davison's calm, persistent, devastatingly methodical questioning, Marjorie's carefully constructed narrative disintegrated. She couldn't logically reconcile her claim of the pond leaping out with the physical evidence of the skid marks originating far back on the street. Confronted repeatedly with the clear doorbell camera footage showing her excessive speed and wild swerving before she even reached my property line, she became flustered, contradicted her earlier testimony, and resorted to vague claims of sudden, unexpected mechanical failure for which she had no proof. When questioned about the numerous prior warnings from neighbors regarding her dangerous ATV operation, warnings documented in their sworn affidavits, she became defensive, then belligerent, launching into personal insults against her neighbors and Miss Davison. The coup de grace came during the questioning about insurance. Mrs. Evans, Miss Davison asked, her voice quiet, but carrying immense weight. Setting aside your lawsuit against Mr. Henderson for a moment, did you file a claim for the significant damage sustained by your all-terrain vehicle with your own insurance carrier, the company that provided the specific policy covering that vehicle against collision or property damage? A visible wave of panic washed over Marjorie's face. Her attorney leaned in, whispering frantically. After a long, tense silence that stretched painfully in the sterile deposition room, Marjorie, looking cornered and pale, finally muttered the 5 words that effectively sealed her fate on advice of counsel. Fifth Amendment. Invoking the right against self-incrimination in a civil deposition is a tactical nuclear weapon. While legally permissible, The negative inference drawn by the court is devastating. The presumption that a truthful answer would indeed tend to incriminate. It painted a clear picture. Marjorie knew she was at fault, knew her own insurance would deny a claim based on her reckless operation, and had therefore launched this fraudulent lawsuit against me as a desperate gamble to make someone else pay. Miss Davison didn't stop there. She carefully introduced preliminary evidence suggesting potential financial impropriety, documented instances where Marjorie might have used HOA funds, without board approval, to pay for initial legal consultations related specifically to this personal ATV incident, before she formally retained her current blustering attorney. This raised the ugly specter of embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty, adding another layer of potential legal jeopardy for Marjorie. The deposition transcript read like a slow-motion train wreck. Faced with irrefutable proof of his client's blatant negligence, her disastrous, perjurious performance under oath, the devastating Fifth Amendment invocation, and the newly surfaced allegations of financial misconduct, Marjorie's attorney abruptly signaled a desire to discuss settling our counterclaim. His previous arrogance evaporated, replaced by a palpable urgency. But Miss Davison, sensing total victory and adhering strictly to my instructions, accountability, Sarah, full accountability, firmly rejected their initial, inadequate settlement offers. We weren't interested in letting Marjorie buy her way out cheaply. We demanded full financial restitution for every penny of damage she caused, substantial punitive damages to reflect the severity of her recklessness and bad faith, and a formal, public acknowledgement of her wrongdoing. The presiding judge reviewed the extensive evidence presented in the pretrial motions, the police report, the witness affidavits, the video footage, the veterinary reports, the financial documentation of repairs, and, most critically, the damning transcript of Marjorie's deposition, including the Fifth Amendment plea. His ruling was swift and brutal, in a powerfully worded order dripping with judicial contempt. He granted Miss Davison's motion for summary judgment. He dismissed Marjorie Evans's lawsuit against me in its entirety, stating it was objectively frivolous, devoid of any credible basis in fact or law, and potentially constituting an abuse of the judicial process. He ruled that our counterclaim would proceed to trial unimpeded, strongly signaling which way the legal winds were blowing: the prospect of a public trial, the near certainty of being exposed as a liar under oath, the looming threat of potential criminal charges for perjury or insurance fraud, and the concurrent implosion of her HOA presidency. The board, now fully aware of the deposition details and armed with the findings of the financial audit confirming misuse of funds, had convened an emergency meeting, formally removed her from office, and initiated legal action to recover the embezzled money. The cumulative weight of these impending catastrophes finally crushed Marjorie's resistance. Her attorney strongly advised her that proceeding to trial would result in financial annihilation and potential criminal referral. Cornered, disgraced, stripped of her power, and facing utter ruin, Marjorie Evans finally completely capitulated. She agreed to settle our counterclaim under the stringent terms dictated by Miss Davison. The settlement required her to pay, personally and without contribution from any insurance carrier, the full, meticulously documented amount required to restore my property, including the complex pond reconstruction, specialized veterinary care for the injured koi, and complete landscaping replacement, a sum deep into the five-figure range that likely wiped out a significant portion of her savings. It also included a substantial six-figure payment, specifically designated as punitive damages, a painful financial penalty for her egregious conduct, and perhaps the bitterest pill for Marjorie to swallow. The settlement mandated that she provide a formal, written apology, drafted by Miss Davison and signed by Marjorie, explicitly acknowledging her sole responsibility for the crash due to negligent operation of her ATV, retracting all false claims made in her lawsuit, and expressing regret for the damages caused. The financial consequences were devastating for her, forced to liquidate assets to satisfy the hefty settlement and pay her own mounting legal fees. Marjorie had to sell her large house in Willow Glen Preserve, the very symbol of the status she had wielded so imperiously, and move away. The infamous ATV, I later heard, was sold unceremoniously for scrap metal, while the district attorney ultimately declined to pursue separate criminal charges for perjury or insurance fraud, likely deeming the financial ruin and public disgrace sufficient punishment. Combined with the complexities of proving criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt, without a fraudulently paid-out insurance claim, the outcome felt like justice nonetheless, a potent, if non-carceral, form of accountability. Restoring the pond became my focus, a therapeutic act of reclaiming my sanctuary. It was a long, arduous, and expensive process, draining the thousands of gallons of fouled water, carefully netting and transferring the surviving fish and delicate plants to temporary quarantine tanks that filled my garage, painstakingly removing the damaged liner, repairing the filtration system, resetting the heavy stones with rented equipment, installing the new liner, replanting the aquatic vegetation, rebuilding the mangled landscaping, and finally, slowly, carefully, reintroducing the fish to their revitalized home. It took months of dedicated effort, setbacks, and constant vigilance. Slowly, miraculously, life returned. The water cleared. The lilies bloomed again. The surviving koi, including the ogon with its faint, silvery scar, a permanent reminder, explored their renewed surroundings with growing confidence. The gentle murmur of the waterfall once again became the dominant sound, undisturbed by the angry whine of a rogue ATV. Now, often in the quiet transition between day and dusk, when the setting sun paints the sky in strokes of fire and rose, I sit on the smooth, familiar stones by the pond's edge. The air is still, filled only with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the soft chirping of crickets. I watch the fish glide through the clear water, their colors seeming even more vibrant against the dark, clean liner. They are living jewels, serene and undisturbed. The memory of the crash, the ensuing battle, the stress and anger, it all feels distant now, overlaid by the profound peace of this reclaimed space. Marjorie Evans is gone, her reign of reckless entitlement extinguished. Willow Glen Preserve feels lighter, calmer. Looking at the ogon's scar, shimmering faintly in the twilight, I don't feel anger anymore. Just a quiet acknowledgement of resilience, both the fish's and my own. We survived, I think. The pond, my sanctuary, endures, and the lesson, learned at considerable cost but deeply ingrained, resonates in the gentle murmur of the water, in the face of chaos, absurdity and malice, patient persistence, unwavering truth backed by irrefutable evidence, and the willingness to fight for what is right can ultimately restore balance and reclaim peace, even in the manicured confines of suburbia.